Why do you think these sort of modern representations of female stories are so devoid of love? You know, looking at the Barbie movie, there's these previews of the Snow White movie coming up. Rachel Ziegler doesn't really look like she's pro-love. What do you think's going on?
Well, I think the demise of marriage and long-term relationships, what that means is with relationships, a bit like when you watch a movie and the whole movie can be great, but if the ending is shit, we'll say movies are shit, that movie was awful. Similarly, if the ending is fantastic, you'll say that whole movie was great. Usually the people pushing this narrative have just come out of a negative relationship. So they define the entire course of love and the entire course of relationships by their particular ending. And if the ending was terrible, love is terrible. And they label it like that. And they also like to run with the narrative that my ex is a narcissist. It's their favorite phrase on the planet at the moment. What that does is kind of devoid us of the responsibility in causing that toxicity, blame it on someone else, and then blame love as a separate entity as a cause for our pain, when really it's our behaviors. So the love isn't toxic, it's how we behave in love and how we behave when vulnerable that creates toxicity. But it's easier to just say that love is this really dangerous emotion and we should avoid it at all costs and always keep our armor up just in case love comes at us and kills us, when really it's our poor decision making or our behaviors that cause love to be toxic.
It's strange to me that it appears to be like a top-down narrative as well. It's not just individuals rejecting love, it's also in movies, it's in culture as well.
Yeah, and I do think there is a lot to be gained from convincing people that love is toxic and you don't need it, because independence breeds more customers, whether it's on social media, whether it's on porn sites, whether it's on cosmetic surgery. Independence creates customers. So I think that it makes total sense from a marketing perspective to breed the idea that love is no longer necessary. I saw a lot of interviews from the star of Snow White where she was almost making digs at what is actually quite a sweet fairy tale, but trying to make it into digs. And I just thought, I'm guessing the narrative of seeing love as weak is being propagated in the culture today.
There's a quote from that interview. She's not going to be saved by the prince. She's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be. The prince in the original movie stalked her.
Why would you sign up to a film if that's what you believe it was the message behind it? I'm guessing because here's what they're taking is, I'm not saying Disney movies were great for our perception of love either, but the idea of mocking connection and let's say, for example, somebody does save you and you're in a bad position, but they do save you. Why is that so negative? If somebody's going through something and you find a partner and they help you heal and you both help each other heal, why is that a negative thing? Maybe I've got it wrong, but the narrative I'm getting is it's almost seen as embarrassing to fall in love, when really it's an essential component of our life. We all need it.
It seems to me the advice for men suggests that falling in love makes you irrational and weak. And for women, it makes you subservient and dependent. And it's almost the opposite of what both sexes want to have, right? There's a trend of wanting women to have their own independence at the moment. More power to them. And there's a trend of wanting men to be able to stand up for themselves more. And love is being positioned as the antithesis of the thing that you're trying to get.
Yeah. Well, love is seen as suffering. And here's the thing. There's a big difference between pain and suffering. Pain is just things that happen in our life. Let's say the person you love passes away, or you can't have a baby. That's pain. But suffering is the emotional consequences of our poor decision making. Now, if you feel like love is suffering for you, have a look at your decision making. If you're becoming weak, but if you choose wisely, you won't see it as being weak. You'll see it as being compatible, and you see it as being compromising. And if you're becoming subservient, if you choose the right person, you won't see it as a form of abuse. But if you're making poor decisions, of course love is going to be a form of suffering. But suffering is a reminder that you made wrong choices. When you feel like you can't access something, the best and quickest way to defend your ego is to pretend you don't want it. So when you feel like you're not worthy of love, and which I really think is a manifestation of low self-esteem, when you feel like you're not worthy of love, the quickest and easiest way to feel worthy is to pretend love is terrible, pretend love is toxic. And I see this a lot in red pill men and really high, like proud feminists. Both cohorts tend to be people who personally probably believe that they're not desirable to the opposite gender. So the only way to get rid of that feeling of like being undesired is to pretend you don't desire the opposite gender. So I see it both, and they're almost a perfect match for each other. That blue-haired, feminist and that red pill guy, they're almost a perfect match because they both almost have the same pathologies when it comes to their understanding of love. So they should get together.
That would be a very interesting relationship to observe. Yeah, there's this idea called the inner citadel that people retreat into. If you can't get what you want, you must teach yourself to want what you can get.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're describing. If I tell myself that all women are awful, then it doesn't force me to try and get into a relationship, and therefore I don't need to feel the pain of heartbreak.
Exactly.
If I tell myself that jobs are completely pointless, then I can sit in unemployment and not be concerned about not making progress toward my goals.
Exactly. But the problem with that is it prevents you from fulfilling your potential in life. Human beings are designed with the potential to love and nurture one another. And whenever we cap our potential, whether that's through we cap our potential physically, emotionally, psychologically, anything that involves capping our potential will lead to a slow and steady depression that will signal to yourself that you're not fulfilling your potential, and it will come out and manifest as a form of depression. So when you ward off love, you're warding off your own full potential, and therefore you will see an increase in your depression and anxiety. They even find studies where women, when they hold their partner's hand during labor, they experience less pain. That's how much we're designed to be in love. It's actually a pain relief. It's an anti-anxiety. They found loads of studies where they see people that sleep with lots of people in a communion, they sleep better. They don't have any micro awakenings in the night. So our body craves it. Whether you psychologically convince yourself you don't want it, your body will still speak to you and tell you that you need it. So unfortunately, it doesn't work. So when people come to me and they have insomnia, they have depression, the first thing I ask is, what are your connections like? What is your relationships like with other people? And they convince themselves they don't want a relationship. But I do understand. There's a part of me, and I've spoken about this a little bit when I was speaking to my clients, I can understand why the lazy kind of man that feels undesirable is avoiding relationships, because there's a lot of effort for very little return, when the alternative is I can either watch pornography or I can hire an escort. Again, little effort and a maximum return. So I get, from a logical point of view, if I'm going to spend hundreds of pounds on a date and she might not even sleep with me, I could spend half of that on an escort, and she definitely will. But the goal of life is not to get sex, it's to get connection. And that's what they're trying to skip, unfortunately. So when you want to court a beautiful woman in the real world, she requires some emotional connection first and foremost, or at least at some point. Now, if you find it hard to experience emotional connection and you have the money to go from pornography to escorts, you skip the emotional component and go straight to escorts. Basically, escorts are porn addicts with money. The reason why emotional disconnect is so important for the customer is a man that understands emotional intelligence and understands a woman's emotions wouldn't feel comfortable having sex with a woman he knows doesn't want to be there. A guy that normally has emotional intelligence will think, oh God, she's probably not enjoying this, and oh God, what trauma led her to get here? I don't want to have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex with me. But the man who skipped that emotional intelligence and just wants pleasure will not even think about the emotional trauma that got her to this position, and just think, as long as she pleases me, I don't really care what it took to get her here. What happens with OnlyFans and strippers and sex workers in general, the pool of women that they're left with are men they don't respect. The reality is women respect men with masculinity, alpha, protectiveness, providing, etc. Now, when you go into sex work, you are left with, firstly, your customers are incredibly low self-esteem, incredibly naive to even believe that you're going to be loyal to them. And even if he's not your customer and he's your boyfriend, but he accepts your sex work, a part of you doesn't see him as powerful and a provider, and doesn't see him as protective. Because if he was truly protective, he wouldn't be with you. If he was a man that genuinely was an alpha man and wanted a good woman, he wouldn't be with you. So the type of men they truly respect wouldn't be with them. So the only men they definitely can't fall in love with the guy that is giving them money. The closest thing they get to that is the pimp that's taking money from them, because at least then they kind of respect the fact that he's using her in a way. But to be manipulated by her, she feels more powerful than him and therefore can't respect him.
I wonder how many girls in strip clubs get into relationships with the bouncers and the door staff and the manager and stuff like that.
They end up they're just more likely to be with a man that they provide for than a one that provides for them. Because a man that provides for a stripper, there's a stupidity in that. Because you know this woman's transactional and yet you're giving her money, she can't respect you. But the man she has to pay for, whether he's like a bouncer that's on half her wage or he's just a personal trainer that she has to cover the rent for, she's more likely to fall in love with him because at least he's not stupid enough to financially invest in me. And a part of her unconsciously respects him more than the CEO that's going to buy you a house and a Range Rover because she's like, you're so stupid. So when we use the word you're slut shaming, what we're really saying is stop pointing out the flaws in my flawed behavior. Essentially, we need a society filled with guilt, shame, and regret. We need to be aware of these emotions. If we remove shame from our society and we call it fat shaming, slut shaming, essentially we find a way of normalizing what is abnormal behavior. And when we do that, we then become reckless. We need guilt, shame, and regret to help direct us into making proper decision making, responsible decision making, healthy decision making. So whenever you hear the word that's fat shaming and that's slut shaming, if the word before it is negative, then the concept is broken.
Well, what would you say to the people who say, we've had a sexual revolution, Sadia, we don't need, girls can sleep with guys as much as they want to. Yeah. This is the new world. Get up to date now. It's 2023. Mm-hmm. Why should it be the case that is negative, shameful, guilt-riddled behavior?
Because you're the one saying that men are trash, and yet you're sleeping with them. It's the women that sleep around the most that will say men are trash. The women in healthy relationships are not usually the ones saying that. So if this formula is working, why are you allowing trash to enter your vagina?
The reason that more slut shaming comes from women than it does from men is because women are invested in other women not lowering the price of sex too low.
Yeah.
Men would happily have the price of sex be zero, right? If you are prepared to give blowjobs on the third date, but I want to wait until the fifth date. I'm also a girl. Yeah. And I want to wait until the fifth date. It's in my interests to raise the price of sex, right? By shaming anybody who is more sexually promiscuous than I am. Yeah. So the problem that women are trying to combat is women who give sex without loyalty or resources, right? They want to raise the amount of loyalty and resources that other women use before they will give away sexual access. Now, what I realized, I think is true, men simp shame for the exact same reason in the opposite direction. Yeah. So women are concerned about sex without resources. Men are concerned with resources without sex, right? So what a simp is fundamentally doing is saying, I will give away one of the few things that men are supposed to hold in the highest value, which is their ability to provide, and I will give you that in return for nothing. Yeah. Right? Or in return for some messages through a platform, or perhaps just financially dominated or sugar babying your way through college or traveling or whatever it is that you want to do. So I feel like the energy is very similar between these two, simp shaming and slut shaming. Both of them are trying to ensure that competitors of the same sex don't give away the most valuable resource, which they don't want to have the price of derogated too low. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's a form of intrasexual selection, which in evolutionary psychology just simply means your competition within your sex. Now, the quickest and easiest way for women to beat the competition is verbal aggression. And one of the things that slut shaming does is, firstly, of course, like you mentioned, it reduces the value of sex. So you're competing with people who give it for free. But in addition, by slut shaming, it's our way of unconsciously trying to put other men off that woman. Now, people only slut shame attractive women. You don't see, there are many unattractive women who are also sleeping with lots and lots of men. But what happens with women, they only feel the need to shame when the person is a threat in any way, shape or form. You will not see unattractive women get as many trolls as attractive women online. And you will not get unattractive women who sleep around get as many slut shaming comments as sexually
because they're
attractive.
seen as less of a threat.
They're not a threat.